Hello, BookTube. I have a tag for you, believe it or not. My third tag in 1 week. It's feast or famine over here. It's a tag that I saw on Pints and Paperbacks, and I thought it was fascinating, so I traced it back to the people who made it, which is Seeking Stories, and their answers were fascinating too. It's the Character Adaptation Tag, and I was watching his video with his gigantic black cat. I was watching their video with their wonderful answers, and I was getting more and more angry, more and more hot under the collar, thinking, well, geez, why doesn't anybody tag me on this thing? And then I saw that Brian at Bookish did this tag last year and did tag me. I was one of the only people he tagged. So my outrage was preemptive and premature. so it's the Character Adaptation Tag, and it's for you to briefly discuss a perennial favorite subject of mine, which is the adaptation of characters from books to screen, whether it be small screen or big screen. There are only 3 prompts. I guess to encourage you to elaborate, although I could have stood there to be 30 prompts. The first one is name your 2 favorite book-to-film adaptations. And that's pretty cruel, because even off the top of my head, making a list, I thought of the Holy Trinity from the BBC. David Suchet as Hercule Poirot, Joan Hickson as Miss Marple, and the great Jeremy Brett as Sherlock Holmes. Those all count. And that's more than 2 right there. I thought also of Nasri Rudin Shah's version of Captain Nemo in the movie version of The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which is terrific. It's better than any Captain Nemo that not that there's much competition with James Mason. It's better than any version of Captain Nemo that's ever been done on screen. I loved it. It was mesmerizing. But I also have here George Reeves in The Adventures of Superman. It's a TV show, but it's still an adaptation of a literary character. It's comic books to TV instead of hoity-toity books into full-screen movies. But I still love his version of Superman in The Adventures of Superman is the Kurt Swan Superman brought to life. A middle-aged gym teacher. That was just fantastic to watch. Also, John Wayne's portrayal of the character Rooster Cogburn, both in True Grit, the original movie version of True Grit, and also in its sequel, Rooster Cogburn, is terrific. Best work that the Duke ever did. But if I have to use 2, if I have to set aside 2 only, then I'll go for big productions. The first one being Gregory Peck as Captain Ahab in John Huston's movie version of Moby Dick, which is tremendously powerful performance. And then the next one is from, it's not a movie, but it's a mini-series. It's Franco Zeffirelli's Jesus of Nazareth. A fantastic, moving, beautifully done, all-star mini-series about the life of Jesus, about Jesus of Nazareth. And the lead star, I think, suffered from terminal typecasting, because there's nowhere to go but down if you do such a great job playing Jesus. But Robert Powell was the actor's name, and he's terrific. There's not the slightest bit of sanctimony anywhere in his performance as Jesus. Instead, it's a living, breathing human being, but not the insulting kind. Not the insulting kind that we've seen in many, many adaptations. I won't single anybody out, but not insultingly human. Very much something that, for instance, the religious faithful could watch and like, but still a human being, which is the whole point of the incarnation. So I thought it was terrific. I love every aspect of Jesus of Nazareth, from the actors who come on to chew the screen, like Peter Ustinov as King Herod the Great. There's only one king. He's terrific. Also, Christopher Plummer as Herod Antipas is also great, and there are a bunch of other hammy-over actors. But Powell is great throughout. He's terrific, including what now in the 21st century we would call subverting expectations. There are some famous moments from the Gospel of St. Matthew or the Gospel of St. Luke where you expect that you know how he will do what Jesus does in that scene, and instead he does it in a shadedly different way. It's a magnificent performance, just magnificent. Can only imagine what it took out of him. But that's the first prompt. The second prompt is name 2 of your least favorite adaptations from book to screen. And again, I could go on. Quite a few. I could do quite a few. I have 2 that I think aren't going to sit well with a lot of fanboys out there. One particular kind of fanboy that I don't think watches BookTube, so my second choice is probably free from controversy. But my first one would be Hugo Weaving as Elrond in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy and in the 15 versions that he made, the 15 movies that he made out of The Hobbit. Hugo Weaving plays the Lord of Rivendell, Elrond, and I've always thought that his performance as Elrond is miscast or maybe misdirected. His Elrond is petty and peevish. He's prone to hissy fits. There's nothing like the character that we see in Lord of the Rings. So in the book, Lord of the Rings. So he would be my number one choice for this, for something that it annoys me every time because I love the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I like probably 6 out of the 11 Hobbit movies, bits and pieces of them here and there, but that always nags at me because that's always there. And Hugo Weaving clearly had an idea in mind for what Elrond was like, and it's not my idea, I guess. It might be Peter Jackson's. But the other one, my next choice for my worst, my least favorite, the Dude Bros over in the film reviewing section of YouTube, all of whom are young, all of whom are white, all of whom look like they came out of Central Casting to play Peter Parker in the next Spider-Man movie, which is why they all have such a religiously intense relationship with all Spider-Man movies. But you must know the ones I'm talking about. There are about 50 of them. They drop F-bombs to their mothers. They do it so often. They drop F-bombs all the time. They think that's the way to be intense about a point, is to drop an F-bomb. And they make elaborate, beautifully constructed videos because all of them want to be film directors. And they all look like Peter Parker. And they would be outraged by my second choice. I don't know that there's much partisanship on BookTube about Christopher Nolan, but I'm talking about Christian Bale's ridiculous, mopey, whining Batman in the incredibly overhyped Christopher Nolan Batman movies, which are just awful. they're just awful. And yet the Dude Bro film tube crowd venerates them almost beyond all things, and they appear to give Christian Bale a pass. I don't know why people give Christian Bale a pass. I really don't. But in these movies, he's embarrassing. I only want someone on the Gotham PD to simply arrest this loser in the weird costume. I don't want them to give him special privilege and let him walk around police headquarters brutalizing the Joker. I want them to just arrest him. There's nothing compelling about the Christian Bale Batman or Bruce Wayne at all. So he gets my point. My point here for number 2. And then number 3, the third and final prompt. This is not a long tag unless you make it long. I could do 20 answers to every one of these things. But I didn't want to do violence to the original version. The third one is, which character adaptation improves? Which movie or TV adaptation of a character improves the one from the written source? And Jason, or Brian, Bookish, on his video, mentions that might be one of the reasons why he thought to tag me, because I have often maintained on this channel that adaptations, visual adaptations, whether they be miniseries or movies or TV shows, are almost always better than the original literary source material, in whole or in part. They're almost always better. I don't see how they couldn't be. I really don't see why that's such a heretical opinion. But one of the ones here that improves is definitely along those lines. The first one I'll mention is Tom Hiddleston's Loki in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He's been in like 50 Marvel movies, starting with his appearance as Thor's half-brother Loki in the first Thor movie. And I think, like everybody else who watched that movie, I was blown away. I was totally surprised by how good a job Hiddleston does as Loki. In the comic books, Loki is just a villain. He's just a thoroughly malicious bad guy. There's no hint of the complexity to him that was, for instance, in the Norse myths themselves, where he's the god not of evil but of mischief, and is unpredictable and will often do things that are self-serving or that prank other people, but he's not thoroughly bad until the very end, until Ragnarok. But in the Marvel comics, when Stan Lee brought Loki on as Thor's marquee villain in the comic books, he was just evil, just a horrible, horrible person. And I went into the Thor movie expecting to find that, and instead, thanks, I think, largely to Hiddleston's acting ability, that's not what we see at all, and that has stayed true. The Loki is one of the most popular characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think, because such a charismatic job is done on him. So he would be an example in my mind of someone who, the literary source that I'm talking about here is the comic books, and he improves the version immensely. I would say I mean, I don't want to push the heresy too far here, but I would say that a lot of such improvements happen across the whole of the Marvel Cinematic Universe from the comic book versions. I won't stress it too much. I myself, for instance, just to give one other example, infinitely prefer the Marvel Cinematic Universe version of Captain America to any version from the comic book. The second example I have of a character who is improved by an acting performance comes from Shakespeare. It's Dogberry from Much Ado About Nothing, who's played by Michael Keaton in Kenneth Branagh's movie version of Much Ado About Nothing, and Keaton just swings for the lights. It's just a fantastic little bit piece, and it works a lot better than Dogberry works on the printed page. And it also works a lot better than Dogberry tends to work on stage. Because very often, when I have watched Much Ado on stage, very often Dogberry is played by an actor who also plays other parts. And what Michael Keaton gets to do in Branagh's version is just wind up 100% of his energy and deliver it straight into this character without worrying about scene changes, without worrying about getting off and getting on fast enough. And even in the cases where that isn't true, even in the cases I've seen Much Ado in London and in Berlin and in New York, in all three in those three, I've seen it in other places as well in considerably less professional settings in the Midwest. But in those three productions, Dogberry, the actor who played him, just did Dogberry, but still, I'm sure had to do other things. Stage production, you all muck in. This was Michael Keaton flying in on his personal helicopter, doing this to a T, and then flying out again. And works. I think it works really well. It works much better for me, certainly than any stage production I've ever seen. But it's funnier than the written version in Shakespeare, because the written version doesn't have the pantomime, doesn't have the slapstick. Sorry. Sorry. So those are the three prompts. Three very general prompts. So you can do whatever you want with this. I wish it were bigger. Because we're all diehard readers here on BookTube, but we've all watched a ton of representational plastic media. We've seen a million adaptations and are continuing to watch them all the time. So this is a source of interest. But all that's left to do is tag people. And I want to tag a few people. I want to tag, of course, Marc at Richardson Reads. As a vast DVD collection that's all the way in the other room. So he's had a rough day or he's been feeling sick. So if you get him on the couch, he's just going to look around for it on TV. he's not going to bother to go to the other room. But he does have a vast collection. Has watched a lot of it. Also Jason at Byways and Bookland. I would definitely want to hear this from you. And then Alex, at what page are you on? Not sure how much non-bookish media he consumes, but there must be a track record. Also, Shawn at Shawn Standfast. Shawn Standfast will have turned up in a lot of your comments, made great comments for a long time. He's finally decided to take the plunge and make a channel on his own. And he could do with a lot more subscribers. You know as well as I do. Once you reach that magic 3 digits, that's when it feels real. Once you reach a number of subscribers where you can confidently say, these can't all be people who know me. Now, he already knows that's true, because he knows some of his subscribers and he's never met them. He's just known them through BookTube. But it'd be nice if he had 100 subscribers. That would be nice. And he's a dyed-in-the-wool book person. Wait till you see the background behind him. Oh my God! And he has a resonant voice, and he's been at this a long time. I've already floated the idea that perhaps the OGBG should be 5 people instead of 4. But one way or another, I definitely want to tag him. I don't know how much time he has for tags, but I'd love to hear it. And then Marc Nash. I have a feeling that Marc Nash is not exactly a shrinking violet when it comes to expressing his opinions about books. I'd be willing to bet it's the same thing with TV and movie. And then Jennifer, and insert literary pun here. I don't want these vicious BookTube rumors that there's a rift between us to solidify. Yes, it's true that in her latest video she revealed that she intentionally obtained a kitten instead of a puppy. Intentionally. And that she intends to raise the thing and live with it and love it. But nevertheless, we can still be friends. And she probably has lots of opinions on this subject. And the same thing with Olive. Olive is a recidivist when it comes to living and loving cats, so there's no hope for her. She's a lost cause. And she has the most distinctive looking cat anywhere on BookTube. which is exactly not surprising when it comes to Olive. But she probably has tons of opinions here. And I know I don't want to stage manage anybody's videos, but if Olive decides to do a movie adaptation tag, the form that Steve would most like to see it in would be one of the rare videos that she does unscripted with her hubs, where they both talk about adaptations. That would be lots of fun. And there you go. Oh, wait. Of course, I also tag Britta. New year, new backlog. So there you go. I want to hear all about it. This subject always fascinates me. What you think of the adaptations that you've seen and what you like and don't like. I noticed that in Seeking Stories and Pints and Paperbacks and Brian at Bookish, there was a lot of talk about the Lord of the Rings, about Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy and the 17 movies that he made out of The Hobbit. And that's interesting to me. That's fascinating. I like that back behind that is the kind of tacit acknowledgement that we all seem to have, which is that at least his Lord of the Rings trilogy is fairly major work. That it's worth thinking about seriously. I love that. But I want to hear it all. Waiting for the first person to mention To Kill a Mockingbird. Or for some oldie McOlderson like Mark to mention an old submarine movie, Das Boot or something like that. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. That is my version of the Character Adaptation Tag. And a very belated thank you to Brian for tagging me all those months ago, or all those weeks ago. At least now I've done it. And that is my third tag for this week. So I'm all tagged out. And I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.